Hello, Carmen.
Hi, Kyla.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Good. Good. It's nice to see you again.
Oh, it's so nice to see you. I love connecting.
So do I. And I'm just going to share for those listening how we connected. And it's funny, we were both kind of just before we hit record saying that we're not techie, like we're not really tech people. Um, but we met through a technical device. We met through the computer. We met through the internet. We met through, I put out a question in a group of female entrepreneurs just for some market research, and you and I hopped on a call, and pretty quickly I was like, oh, we need to have more conversations. We need to have more conversations. So thank you for being open to having more conversations with me.
Oh, I'm happy to. I think that just from that initial conversation with you, I felt that connection, and I felt like we had more to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And this is a perfect space for it. I feel like the conversation will be just based on our earlier conversation. I guess that was a couple months ago now. I know that there's going to be really beautiful tidbits and takeaways and golden nuggets in here for the women listening. So let's just start off with the quintessential question, which is, what are you currently reclaiming?
I love this question.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such an important question. Um, and I really think that what I'm reclaiming right now is self, but in a different way than I've ever before. So it's more of I've spent a lot of time on my outward self,
Mm-hmm.
whereas this is much more inward. And when I say inward, just to go a little more specific, it's probably more in my feeling self. So
Okay.
really recognizing my emotions and giving space for those bigger emotions that I've avoided most of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those big feelings.
Yeah.
um, yeah. Mm-hmm. So were you right? I feel like I can answer this question just based on what you just said, but is it safe to say that nobody was, I don't want to use the word, I'm just going to use it. Was there no one there to welcome your big feelings growing up? Like, was that not demonstrated to you that your big feelings were safe and welcome and part of you?
Definitely. I think that
Yeah.
I came into this world as a very emotional human being, and
Hmm.
I think that I was not received in the way that I needed to be, that I was safe,
Hmm.
that those feelings were
Hmm.
safe. I
Hmm.
think that my feelings were so big that they actually were too much for my parents and
Yeah.
especially my mother. Like, I think,
Yeah.
in all fairness, I think that my mom didn't really know what to do with me and my big feelings.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
I feel like that's such a big part of, I mean, it's such a trendy term right now, but it's a thing, the mother wound and the sister wound, and just these woundings that we have as women together. And if we think back to how our mothers were raised,
Mhm.
they also had no space for big feelings. Like there wasn't space for it, there wasn't time for it, and their parents didn't have the know-how, they didn't understand it. It really is this us, it's this generation, it's happening now, where we're starting to learn about big feelings and where they come from and how to be with them, and that they're not bad and they're not wrong. And it's a lot, because we could go down the rabbit hole of, well, if they just were able to be with my feelings when I was little, I wouldn't have XYZ. But it's our journey, and it's the healing process, and we're doing this work for them because they didn't do it, and they didn't know how. It's really, I had a client say it's a privilege. I feel really honored to be able to do this work for the women and the families, my lineage before me, that couldn't.
Mhm.
And so it is big. So I'm here with you. Applaud you.
Yeah, that what you
Yeah.
just said really resonates with me. I think for a while there, instead of really focusing on my personal healing, it was more of an
Mhm.
outside, almost being upset with my mother and not
Yeah.
really understanding that she did the
Hmm.
very best that she could. And
Hmm.
it's definitely taken me my own recognition of now, what I am responsible for, that I am
Mm-hmm.
responsible for that it's not a pointing the finger out and saying, because of you, that very
Mm-hmm.
well might be the case.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that, and now it is my responsibility. And that I understand that,
Mm-hmm.
you did the very best that you could with the tools and experience that you had, and that
Yeah.
it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough
Yeah.
for me, and now I can tend to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's such a great example and testament to the work that you do and have done with yourself to hold that both, I understand, and there's space for forgiveness that like you didn't know different. I understand that, and it wasn't enough,
Yeah.
right? Like there gets to be both. We can love our parents and our caregivers so dearly and be upset at them and be let down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, that's
Quickly before we, oh, no,
oh, I was just gonna
no,
say
you
that
go.
that's been probably one of the most interesting pieces is just allowing myself the space to recognize what's coming up for me. And so
Mhm.
my reaction and how that showed up for me, it's been quite an interesting journey. It certainly didn't happen overnight. It's taken a
Mhm.
lot of work to get to the place that I am today. So
Mhm.
I don't want to just like sugarcoat it and make like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to heal this wound, because it's not. It takes a lot of personal work, and um it's important work, and
Mhm.
it is worthwhile work,
Mhm.
but it doesn't just happen overnight.
No, it really doesn't. It
Yeah,
really doesn't. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. And you work with clients. Tell the people a little bit about who you are and how you support others in this way before we go right into the chat.
Sure. I was a real estate agent actually for 17 years. And
Hmm.
after, actually, sort of during the pandemic, that was sort of was really realizing it caused a lot of reflection for me.
Hmm.
Real estate was the one thing that didn't shut down. Like, maybe
Yeah.
it paused for 3 to 4 weeks, but
Hmm.
it really never shut down. And there was a part of me that, without knowing it, I was burnt out. And I
Hmm.
felt like, oh my gosh, this is going to be an opportunity to just take care of myself and like not have to be taking care of others. And that wasn't the case. If anything, it just sort of threw me into like, now you're not just taking care, like you're care and doing it like on a whole different way. And I think that I started to really think about like, is this really what I want to be doing? Is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? Like,
Right.
paying attention to those feelings that were coming up, and that kind of
Hmm.
frustration that was showing itself, and the grittiness of like, this is not what it doesn't feel good anymore, and I don't want to
Hmm.
show up like this. Because
Hmm.
when I loved taking care of people. I loved that service aspect. And when I
Hmm.
wasn't feeling happy about going to work, I I can't fake that. Like, I can't pretend that
Hmm.
I'm not feeling all these things and frustration and not really wanting to do this currently. And
Hmm.
so I really started reflecting on my life. I also had gone through something just months before the pandemic began. And that also was like causing me to just what it was actually the rug being pulled for the second time for me. So
Yeah.
it was a medical situation, and that was sort of the catalyst to this next change. So
Yeah.
I ended up going back to school, just to sort of bring it full circle. I went back to school and I received certifications in Ayurveda health, meditation instruction, and then well-being
Hmm.
coaching. And
Hmm.
so I decided to leave my real estate career and to move
Hmm.
completely into the coaching business. So it's personal transformation and well-being coaching is really where my focus is. And I've also now gone into a little realm of working. I've taken my death doula certification, and I'm now taking a grief and loss facilitation training, which
Hmm.
um, is really, really important work. I think that we
Hmm.
are all grieving in various different ways. And I
Yeah.
don't know that it's getting the attention that it needs to. And I think if we don't start giving it the attention that it needs and we don't start healing, the
Hmm.
problems that we have on this planet right now are going to continue to grow and get worse.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's part of that, grief is a big feeling, and people are still learning that that's okay, that's allowed.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, it's such important work. I'm so pleased that you're in it. It's so important.
yeah,
Thank you, thank you. It's kind of sweet that you help your clients reclaim exactly what you're reclaiming. Like you help them come back to themselves, find themselves.
yeah, yeah,
It's not always
absolutely.
it. We always help the people with we always like coach on what we either need or are experiencing, and it's the most authentic uh, way to share. I think you find something and you're like, oh, this is so profound. I need to share it with everybody. Oh my gosh, this feels so good. I need to share it with everybody, and
Yeah.
it's so good.
It's interesting. I've heard before someone say that your mess is your message.
I've heard that too.
And I thought, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense
Hmm.
to me. Yeah.
Hmm. Truly. And it's sort of in that same category of everything happens to us for a reason. There is a reason, there is a purpose for everything, right? And that generally it's the messy parts where we're like, what in the heck? Why is this happening? And then, maybe it's a month later, maybe it's 10 years later, maybe it's 50 years later, there's this, oh,
Yeah.
oh, oh, I see now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if kind of with that can you reflect on some of maybe your personal, like most noteworthy or profound moments of healing or growth or self-discovery or somewhere in there?
Yes, because I think that mine has been quite an evolution and continues to be,
Hmm.
of course. But it really began for me in 2009. In
Okay.
2009, I found out, just due to a strong family history of cancer, breast
Hmm.
specifically,
Okay.
I was given the opportunity to be tested for a gene mutation. It
Okay.
was on my dad's side of the family.
Mhm.
And so I I struggled with whether or not I really wanted to find out this information or
Mhm.
not. And
Mhm.
I I ended up finding I decided to get tested, and I found out that I carried the BRCA1 gene mutation, which,
Okay.
after meeting with BC Cancer and finding out more information, it put me at a very high risk of breast and ovarian cancer specifically. There are other cancers, but those are the main risks. So, and by risk, by factors, I mean like 88% chance of getting breast cancer. And I
Okay.
was told that I had 1 in 20 chance that I already had ovarian cancer.
Oh,
And
wow.
because the screening methods are still not really great for women, a lot of times the symptoms are how they find ovarian cancer. And so,
Hmm.
uh, I had to weigh what to do at that moment of
Hmm.
do I get ahead of potentially diagnosis is coming my way, or
Hmm.
do I preventatively take steps to take care of having my ovaries and fallopian tubes and having a double mastectomy. And as I was finding out this information about this gene mutation, one of the mums from the kids' school that I would walk with on a regular basis. There was a group of women that we all sort of walked in, and it was like therapy.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
hadn't been with them. I hadn't been out with them for quite some time. And I needed time to sort of process this information that I had found out about. And so I would drop the kids and then sort of disappear, which was very
Hmm.
unlike me.
Yeah.
So there was one morning where I finally felt like I was in a better place of just being able to share. This is what I found out. This is what I'm trying to
Hmm.
figure out to do. And as we were out on a walk, and as I started to tell what was happening for me, my friend Marianne spoke up and she just said, "Before you say one more word, you need to know I've been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer." And it was one of those moments in time where everything just sort of freezes, and you just
Hmm.
y- I remember where I was. I remember everything about that moment of us just being there. And this realization that I don't, I don't have a choice. Like, I need to take care of this. Like, and she's saying
Mhm.
to me, do whatever you can to get ahead of this.
Yeah.
And that was it that day. That solidified the decision. And so I moved
Mhm.
forward with preventative surgeries. And that started with my ovaries and fallopian tubes being removed. And then I was barely recovering from that, heading in to see the next surgeon around a removal of my breasts.
Wow.
And I ended up doing 3 surgeries in 1 year.
Wow.
So removing after I did removal of my breasts and then reconstruction, which it's
Mhm.
a bit of a process with tissue
Mhm.
expanders, and that's the process that I went through.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the beginning of
Mhm.
my healing journey without knowing it. Being able to see,
Mhm.
when you ask the question, that's where it really began for me, would have been
Yeah.
2009, 2010, heading into having surgeries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm. And what has been in between that and now? Because let's just be clear, the healing journey never ends. So what has been, or if it does, I don't know.
Yeah.
What's the in between from there to here?
Well, interestingly, I think one of the biggest things I had to deal with was grief in that
Mhm.
part. As I was making decisions, although I didn't understand it at the time, I didn't understand that I would need to grieve these body parts.
Oh yeah. Oh
I
yeah.
Yeah, I didn't connect that, and it actually took.
Mhm.
I ended up. Marianne did pass away, and it was
Oh,
in
I'm so
her
sorry.
passing away that sort of like, how you just keep pushing things down? It's like a cylinder where I
Yes.
just keep pushing. And
Yeah.
that was just that point of like, it all came. It was like, it wasn't waiting for me. And I think that that's the
Mhm.
interesting thing about grief is it doesn't wait for you to be ready. It's like,
Mm.
it's time. And so
Yeah.
that was a big part. That was sort of one of the big parts that came out of going through that experience that I had to work through. And then, interestingly, just before the pandemic happened,
Mhm.
I was waiting to see a doctor about some autoimmune situations that had been popping up in my health, which I had been after my surgeries. My doctor doesn't see me very often. I don't go in very
Mhm.
often. However,
Mhm.
I was having these sort of odd things that were happening that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And as I was waiting to go in to see my family doctor, one of my aunts phoned me and said, "Do you know what kind of breast implants you have?" And I was like,
Mm.
"That's a strange question." And
Mhm.
I said, "I have no idea." And so she said, "You need to get in to see your doctor." And I said, "Well, ironically, I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting to go into an appointment." And so as I went into that appointment, I asked the question, and they were the
Mhm.
breast implants that Health Canada had just recently recalled.
Okay.
So that was sort of one of those moments
Mhm.
where everything sort of once again slowed down, like everything kind of goes into slow
Mhm.
motion. And I was asking a lot of questions about, well, do you think this is connected to a number of the things that I've been in to see you about this year?
Yeah.
I mean, at
Yeah.
this point, it was May. The year started with me going in for appointments.
Yeah.
And the first response, I mean, first he had to tell me that he had to look up my file and see that those were the breast implants that were in me.
Yeah.
And then, that whole feeling that I was having of like, okay, is this why I've had these other, and the
Of
reaction
course it
was,
is.
oh, I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Like, I don't think that
Yeah.
there's a connection to anything you're talking about. But I'm sitting with these in my body now going,
Yep.
something doesn't feel right, doesn't add up. And
Yep.
so I left that appointment, um, and went home and did what everything that the news report had said, which was do a breast exam, even though I don't have my original breast.
Yeah.
and I noticed a fluid sac underneath my right implant. And so I went back into the doctor's office and I said, I'm feeling something that doesn't feel right here. And he felt around for it and he told me, I don't feel anything. I think that this is, you're now kind of blowing this out of proportion. And I was like, oh no,
Wow.
something is happening in my body and I know it.
This infuriates me.
Yeah.
I've heard so many stories like this. Okay, carry on. Wow.
Well, it is. I mean, and like, I think that this is where our intuition, this is where
Yes.
we know ourselves. And
Yes.
to be, I mean, I think this is where it is very difficult as women to find our voices and to be able to ask
Hmm.
for what we need, even in a situation where someone is saying, oh, you're overreacting. Like,
Hmm.
well, I don't like the way you're responding to this information. And
Right.
it's like, well, I'm responding to this information in the only way that I know how, which is truly how I'm feeling and experiencing it.
Yeah.
Um, and at that point, when I went back in, I said, I need an ultrasound and I need blood work. I need to now be marking
Good.
this information that we have just found out. We need to be now marking from this point on.
Yeah.
And he was like, sort of wasn't open. And I actually said, if you do not do this, if you do not send me for these next steps, I will find somebody that will.
Yeah.
That's how this is going to
Wow.
go. I have to do this. I have to take care of and self advocate.
Yeah.
And so he did agree. And I went for an ultrasound. And that is when he had to call me in the evening after those results came in and said, there's definitely something not right. And I need to send you for a fine needle biopsy.
And I'm sorry. Was there an apology ever?
Yes, he actually,
Okay.
I must say, he felt very, when he called, he did feel like, I am so sorry. You're right. There's something
Mhm.
that's not looking right. Yeah.
Okay. So then what happened?
I went for the fine needle biopsy. And once
Hmm.
again, that was a very difficult biopsy because whatever was happening in this fluid sac was not of a thin enough to be like pulling a sample. And so it took hours um, and many different pokes to try and see if we could get what they would need. Um, to the point where the doctor even sent the needle that they were using to the lab just because she was frustrated with there was something there, but she couldn't get it through. She couldn't get it through the needle. Uh,
Wow.
yeah. And so that began like the trying to get the help that I needed.
Hmm.
So back to
Hmm.
my family doctor kind of going, the only thing I know to do is to send you back to your plastic surgeon.
Yeah.
So with the all of the information I had now with the ultrasound, the fine needle biopsy results, I went to the original plastic surgeon. And
Hmm.
at the time, I think plastic surgeons were very nervous about this recall.
Hmm.
And I was not met with in the way that I would have hoped. The fact that I had done my own going at it with getting an
Hmm.
ultrasound, a fine needle biopsy, um, once again was met with a very much like you're over dramatizing a news story. Um, and at that point, I just said to the surgeon, so you need to understand that my situation is that I removed my breasts preventatively to avoid
Hmm.
a form of cancer. And I am now at risk for another form of cancer because the
Yeah.
breast implants were causing lymphoma and women have died. And that's why the recall happened. And so I said to him, so I don't understand why you're not thinking that I'm going to take this information as seriously as I'm taking it.
Uh-huh.
And then asked he asked me he didn't give me a gown. He did an examination. He told me to take my clothes off while he was still in the room and to in order to do it. And when which is really, I was like, whatever I need to do, I need this exam done. I need you to do what I need, which is an explant surgery. So
Yeah.
when I removed my clothes, he looked at me and said, why would you ruin, like, this result is so incredible. They don't even look like they're not yours. And I just looked at him and I just said, like, I don't think you're understanding
Wow.
where I'm coming from. And he said, okay, but you're going to replace the implants, right? And I said, no, I'm not going to replace the implants. And he looked at me and he said, you can't not have breasts. And I looked at him and I said, watch me. And I knew
Yes.
I left that doctor's office in tears because I just
Yeah.
knew he's not going to be
Yeah.
the one to help me. And that's when it got really difficult because he was my original plastic surgeon. Now I went back to my family doctor and my family doctor's like, I don't even know where to send you. So he ended up
Yeah.
sending me back to BC Cancer and
Okay.
to one of the breast surgeons. And she said to me, I don't know what you want me to do because you don't have breasts. Yeah. And so I said, well, will you at least, like, she said, did you bring the reports, like, and everything? I said, I have everything here. So she said, can I review it? And she reviewed it. And then she asked me if she could do a breast exam. And I said, absolutely. And it was in that breast exam that she said, there's something in your lymph nodes now. There is something that is happening and you need to get them out. I agree that you need to get them out. And so at that point, I shared with her, there's a Facebook group that's called Breast Plant Illness by Nicole. And
Hmm.
I had discovered with the recall happening, I had discovered this group. And within this group, they had actually identified surgeons like all over the world that would do proper explant surgery. So a proper explant surgery is removing the entirety because our body forms like it forms like a healing shell around the implant. And so you have to have the implant removed as well as all of what is now encasing it.
Wow.
And so I showed this doctor the list of surgeons that were on this list, and she identified two of them and said, I want you to leave here today and call those two surgeons. And so I did. I did exactly what she requested. One surgeon I couldn't even get through to, that, like, I couldn't even, I left a message. And I think the message said that their inbox or something was full. Like, I couldn't even get a message to the first one.
Okay.
And then the second one was a female plastic surgeon. And I called her
Mhm.
office. They told me she has like an 18-month wait to even get in to see her. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give you my name and number, and I will come in. If you have a cancellation, I will come in. I will leave my house and I will come immediately. Like, I need to get in to see her about what's happening.
Mhm. Yeah.
And this is where I believe that there is definitely something divinely happening.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I received a phone call a week later. I believe that doctor may have contacted the surgeon and said, we have a situation that needs to
Yeah.
be looked. I can't say for certain. I just know that I got an appointment.
Wow.
I was told that she had a cancellation the following day, and I said, I'm in. I'll take it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when she took a look at everything, she said, you definitely need to look at explanting. Um, she was very concerned about me not doing reconstruction.
Interesting.
Yeah. She had her concerns. She said, you're young. Um, I really want you to leave here today and go speak to somebody. Like, I want you to speak to, like, a therapist, and
Mhm.
talk about what this would mean, which I was lucky enough I had a therapist, so that wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had already been talking to that therapist about what was happening for me.
Yeah.
But she wanted that, and she wanted it in writing. She wanted me
Okay.
to send it in writing in an email of that I was fully aware of what I was choosing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. And so I did.
wow.
Yeah. So in 2019, I explanted the implants and remained flat.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
was the second rug being pulled. So that to me,
Yeah.
I had taken care of and had turned my attention to certain parts of myself, like dealing with my grief,
Yeah.
but I hadn't taken care of everything. And I was very much in the
Hmm.
world of doing instead of being.
Hmm.
And so I was
Yeah.
constantly busying myself. And I
Yeah.
think that this was the rug being pulled to say,
Yeah.
this is your last warning. There is no third time. You have work to
Wow.
do, and it is time to pay attention and heal so that you can do the work that you were put here to do. And I took that
Yeah.
seriously. And I
Hmm.
decided from that point that I'm I'm not messing around. That this is, it's so interesting because we're taught that this exterior appearance of a woman
Hmm.
is,
Hmm.
what matters and what's important. And we are so much greater and so much more than that.
Yeah.
And it has been such an interesting part to go through and to recognize. Um, and I'm grateful for it because it's it's introduced me to parts of myself that I don't think I would have learned otherwise. So I
Hmm.
don't look at this as happening to me. I look at it as
Hmm.
happening for me because it really
Hmm.
opened me up to a facet of myself that I don't know that I would have gotten to otherwise.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So what is it now? Is that just almost 5 years that
Yes,
this has
that would have
been?
been, yeah, I was sort of recovering in 20, yeah, just before, like the pandemic happened like March. So yeah, like 6 months prior to the pandemic. That's what,
Wow.
and thank goodness, like once again, divinely orchestrated.
Hmm.
Can you imagine if I hadn't had that surgery and then we went into
No.
a pandemic and then all surgeries, especially
No.
what was considered an elective surgery.
Yeah.
Oh, I also should just say that I was not like if I want it to be covered by our healthcare, I would
Hmm.
have had to wait 2 years for that surgery. So I pulled
Wow.
out of pocket $10,000
Oh my God.
because I knew I was getting sick. And I should
Even with
also,
a recalled product.
yeah, a medical device that
Wow.
was recalled. And, I think that the other thing that I'll say about it is I wasn't notified of that recall.
Right.
My plastic surgeon never notified me. I was never given a letter. I was never phoned. My aunt alerted me to a CTV news report about.
What?
So you think about like a motor vehicle if there's a recall and a person is
Hmm.
given a letter identifying what the
Yep.
recall is and given an opportunity to go in and have that repaired or
Yep.
replaced at no cost.
Yep. Yes.
And this is human beings
Yep.
with a medical device that has been placed. And I think that that is what has bothered me the most is that this was the most commonly used breast implant in women that had had mastectomies because of
Yeah.
because of the way they sat in the body. There was almost like this. There was a part of. I'm trying to the word that I'm looking for. They adhered better. Like once you'd removed
Okay.
the breast tissue, they
Yeah.
adhered better to what was left. Really, so a
Yeah.
number of women that are breast cancer survivors have these breast implants in them, and some of them don't even know it
Wow.
because there was no mandate that the plastic surgeons notify their patients. And I actually went to the news about that because I was so
Oh,
horrified
good.
by the
Yeah.
fact that,
Good.
you know, how can you not let people know? Like that is your responsibility.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is different, but it just keeps me in the same loop of like questioning our medical system, which we don't even need to open that can of worms up. My father had pancreatic cancer 7 years ago and luckily found it just based on where the tumor was. It was blocking his bile duct and causing some. Anyway, they found it, thankfully. Had the surgery, removed everything. Everything was great. He it was a year later, he messaged me and he said, Kyla, do you know that I've not heard from one doctor? I have not done a checkup. I've not been tested. He had to call and say, hey, I had pancreatic cancer last year. You did the Whipple procedure on me. It's an 8-hour surgery. Should I be checked? Should I be scanned? He had to ask for it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's shocking.
wow.
Really. It's really, we really do have to advocate for ourselves. And
Yeah.
this really surprised me. And not just advocate for yourself, but get
Hmm.
loud and demand
Very.
things for yourself.
Yeah,
And that probably was the hardest because you're sort of made to look like you're crazy,
of course. Of
right?
course. Particularly as women.
Yes. And so, you know, pushing forward, making that decision to pay out of pocket. I mean, I had
Hmm.
friends that weren't even understanding what I was doing
Wow.
because I mean, first of all, I think it's a hard decision to make, and
Hmm.
I did not take it lightly. And I
Hmm.
think people just have a hard time with hard things, and
Hmm.
so I lost friendships in just
Wow.
that of not being able to understand what was happening for me and what I
Hmm.
was going through. Um, and it has changed me. I mean, I ended up finding out when they went in to do the surgery that both implants had ruptured inside me. Um, I mean, the pictures are horrifying. One of them
Wow.
looked like chicken. Like it looked like it was, and that was
And you're,
so what was happening was the toxic chemicals that are in an implant were
yeah.
now floating in my chest cavity. And that's why when the surgeon had felt my lymph node, it was now working its way into my lymphatic system.
Right.
Yeah.
And so with an implant that has ruptured, it's from the outside, it all looked the same.
It's well,
That's so
this is
shocking to
this
me.
is what's so interesting is in that's where there's almost like a scar tissue that encases
Okay.
the implant.
Right.
So
Okay.
before an
Hmm.
object goes into your body now is going to respond to it. And so it
Hmm.
builds like
Hmm.
almost like this it's so interesting how the body responds to different things. It builds
Hmm.
this like capsule kind of around
Yeah.
it. And so that's why I
Wow.
felt the fluid lower is because the capsule was actually starting to fail. So not just
Right.
the implant had failed, but now the part that had formed sort of around it was now no longer be able to hold the toxic
Oh.
chemicals that were spilling out of it. And so, yes, to look at them, I never would have noticed that this was happening inside of me.
Hmm.
They didn't deflate. They
Hmm.
didn't look different. Like if I didn't hear about the recall and if I did not do the exam myself and feel
Yeah.
like, oh, there's fluid that shouldn't where it shouldn't be on the outside of
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
don't think that I would have realized how the situation I was really in. And I think
Hmm.
about that and I think about other women and I think about how
Hmm.
scary the idea that something is now happening, that this recall happens, like that's enough. That's a big information for even if people were notified. Some plastic
Yeah.
surgeons did notify their patients, but for
Yeah.
somebody to receive that letter and now have to be faced with a decision of what am I going to do about this? Like,
Yeah.
am I going to deal with it or am I going to just hope for the best?
Hmm.
I found out that I should have been having ultrasounds. I should have been having an ultrasound to just check and make sure that the implant was intact and that there was no issue with it. Like, no, the plastic surgeons don't tell you that. I was never told that it wasn't that a breast implant, would have to be replaced after so many years.
Right.
I had no idea. I mean, at the time, I was facing the fear of potentially a breast cancer diagnosis and trying to get ahead
Hmm.
of that. So I
Hmm.
was following the instructions. I wasn't
Hmm.
asking enough questions. Now realizing,
You assume that you shouldn't have to ask the questions, that it's such a big deal that you would be given more than enough information and that you would be checked in on and supported. I think of how many women I know with breast implants. I don't know if any of them ever get scanned or any ultrasound of any kind.
Yeah, they should be.
Wow.
Every 8 years every 8 years, women should be going for an ultrasound and just having them checked. But you don't.
No.
And no one tells you that you're supposed to. Like, nobody tells you that that should be done. And
Right.
so, and then who do you go to? Do you go to your GP? Do you have to go back to the plastic surgeon? Like, who requests that ultrasound?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in this process. Um,
Wow.
and I think that that's what bothers me the most, was the fact that there are women that were never notified, that aren't aware,
Mm-hmm.
that could think that some of their symptoms are from their chemotherapy or their radiation,
Yeah. Yeah.
never thinking that it could be their breast implant that's making their illness even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I fought for a long time. I mean, I did go to CTV. I was on the news about it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I did go to one of the top plastic surgeons in Vancouver and
Mm-hmm.
demanded that we do better for women. And you're just, everybody's feeding in. Like, I remember going to that meeting and seeing that the floor is basically, the donor of that floor of the hospital is the breast implant company. And I remember
Right.
thinking, how on earth am
Mm-hmm.
I supposed to fight this? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot. And I talked to lawyers who basically told me, like, unless you have a lot of money, you'll never be able to, you'll never be able to take these people on. I'm part of a class action lawsuit to do with the breast
Okay.
implants. Um,
Yeah.
However, it's bigger than that. It's
Mm-hmm.
bigger than just the fact that there's a breast implant recall. It's the treatment of
Yeah.
women.
Yeah.
It's the care that women deserve. And um,
Yeah.
I had to sort of step back from it, just because of, I still advocate strongly for women. However, the
Mm-hmm.
toxicity of it is very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's you get to show up and support and advocate for women in the work that you do to remind them to advocate for themselves
Yeah, absolutely.
ultimately. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And helping them to find their voices and trust
Yeah.
themselves, and to tap into that
Yeah.
intuition that we are born with.
Yeah. I have a question about the clients that you work with. I'm just curious, kind of a pointless question, but is there a general age range of women that are coming to you curious to, like, learn themselves, know themselves? Like, is this, I'm just curious based on who I work with as well. Like this
Um,
rising of,
yeah, it's a good question. And it's an interesting question, because I think it comes down to also, where are we letting people know about our work? Like, how are
mhm,
we getting
also,
the message out about the work that we do? And so I
hmm,
have had a bit of a range of women.
hmm,
Um, I have some women in their 30s, upwards of probably into their 60s, of women that
hmm,
I've been working with.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, that's a pretty significant range. Uh,
hmm,
I do find that as women get older, they start to make their way back to themselves,
yeah,
is what I'm noticing, is that
yeah,
with some lived experience, some experience that we go through, that I think it is the hard things that come across our path that really
hmm,
are the catalysts. They are our
yeah,
way back. And
yeah,
that's not always easy. And I think that what I have known and learned is that we're not supposed to do this alone.
hmm,
And
yeah,
I think that's why I went back to school and decided to do the kind of work I'm doing now, is because I really strongly feel that we are not supposed to try and navigate this alone, and that I want to
hmm,
always be a safe space of no
hmm,
judgment, of that
hmm,
truth and honesty of what is happening for the person, and allowing them to be able to make their way back to themselves, because we all have the answers within us. We just need a
hmm,
little help dusting away
yeah,
some of the dirt, really, that's been
yeah,
put on top of what we know to be
yeah,
true already.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I agree. I couldn't have said it better myself. Before we hit record, we were just talking a little bit about some of those big feelings, and you were speaking about tuning into your anger lately, and
Yeah.
your face kind of lit up, and you looked kind of excited about it. And so I am here for women tapping into their anger. I think it's so important. Can you just, I don't know, I don't really have a specific question, but can we open that up? You spoke about first thinking maybe it was sadness.
Yes.
And then the more you stayed with it, was there anger underneath the sadness? Is
Yeah.
that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that was sort of surprising to me,
Mm-hmm.
the anger piece, and really starting to understand that part of myself and sort of
Mm-hmm.
how I show up and how there was a wound there that needed my
Mm-hmm.
attention. And so
Mm-hmm.
I I think anger is one of those things that, I mean, sadness is one thing, but anger, especially for women, is a totally different beast because it's been a message that we shouldn't be angry and that, you know, nice girls
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
aren't
Mm-hmm.
loud or and anger's been uh, a really beautiful opening for me in the last bit. Um, I think my work with grief is what sort of really helped me to locate it and
Yeah.
really work with it in more of a somatic way of
Mm-hmm.
understanding that my body inward, the parts of me almost have been protecting me, that my anger has been protecting parts,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
um, paying attention to how to release that anger in a safe
Mm-hmm.
way, um,
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to as a space to tell me what it needs to tell me, and to
Yeah.
also move through, to actually move through. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to share with you kind of an interesting. I'm very like
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that we're guided, and
Mm-hmm.
I've had at times I liken it to a voice. I don't know if it's my voice or
Mm-hmm.
exactly what that voice is, but I know that it is present in my life and it has been with me
Yeah.
in very important times in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and with anger, it was really interesting because I have a bath every night, and
Mm.
water is a very healing piece for me. Just
Yeah.
going to water, seeing water can provides me with a lot of healing. And I have a bath every night, and I sit in water. And
Love
one
that.
night I was sitting in my bath, and the voice came and said, "Water can hold the density of anger."
Uh-huh.
And I
Mm.
thought, okay, interesting. And then so in my mind, I was like, so when I go to the lake this summer, I'll scream in when I go underwater, I'll scream. And then the
Yeah.
voice said, "You're sitting in water." And
Yeah.
it was like all the reasons up in my
Mm-hmm.
head. Yeah, but I don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to get my hair wet. I don't want to wash my. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to get my hair wet.
Yeah. Just
And
pushing it off, pushing it off, pushing it
right,
off.
like just sort of that's what we do, right? Like we make
Mm-hmm.
like, oh no, not right now. And then I
Mm-hmm.
decided to put my face in the water and scream. And the the density holds it. And one of my big things with my emotions is from the time that I was a little girl and the sounds that came out of me when
Mm-hmm.
I went through a situation where in the sadness, I sounded like a wounded animal. And I think the
Oh,
sound of things frightened me. And so
okay.
I have done some work with anger, but there was this, I think, fear for me of what will it sound like outside of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost like was
Mm-hmm.
frightening to myself. And
Yeah.
so being able to scream into the water is like it's dense. So all that you don't hear anything, it's just bubbles. Bubbles rise to the top.
Whoa.
And so it
Yeah.
was such a beautiful way for me to move some of that.
Oh.
And then recently I did a workshop that was to do with like it was really grief yoga and
Oh,
all done in a chair. And
oh yeah.
I was sort of fascinated by the whole thing. And we worked with breath, movement,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
sound. And
The three best ways to move trapped emotion and stored energy. Yep. Okay,
right?
go ahead.
Well, and I know you're very familiar with this, and I know you
I
do a lot of
am.
breath work. And so
Hmm.
I had done some breath work, but this I was sort of like really interested in. There was something about the
Hmm.
sound part of it that was, I've done
Hmm.
movement, I've done some breath work, but the sound was what sort of really intrigued me. Anyways, I did the full hour,
Yeah.
and it was unbelievable. Of course, like I had the emotional release,
Hmm.
and then yeah, and this is probably too much information, but I let my dog outside after the class, and then I ran because I was like, oh my God, I have to go to the bathroom. Like
Yeah.
literally my body releasing.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
just so, it blew my mind. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
And we have
Amazing.
that available to us,
All the time.
right? Like, yes, I was
All the
guided in
time.
it. Yes, I had
Yeah.
somebody guiding me, but
Hmm.
my body
Hmm.
could do what it needed to do. And the fact that like it was
Hmm.
being done in a chair, like it's not physically where like a person of any body type could do this.
Yeah.
And I
And
thought
yeah.
that just was like so important for
Well,
me
it
to
was
realize.
creating, yeah, the chair was like creating a physical sense of safety,
Yes.
like a sense of holding so that your body didn't have, it would be very different. I imagine if you were in like a warrior pose, holding yourself, feeling like, oh, this is a little bit hard and pull it together, hold myself. You wouldn't be able to be in your body because you're so in your head, can I hold myself? So that chair was
Oh yeah.
your foundation. That's so beautiful.
And the instructor kept bringing us back to that, like reminding of how we're feeling
Mm,
in the chair, like our body, how we're being supported. Like it was
yeah.
so, and it was the sound, the vibration of like making sound, and the vibration of
Hmm.
that sound, I think was the piece for me that was really really important. So
Wow.
sound healing, like
Hmm.
with the anger, with the
Oh yeah.
fear of the sound, like I think that being able to do that with water, that fascinated me. And then also doing this other work with breath and movement and sound has been another way to move it. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then it just makes space for the goodness to come in. It makes space for,
It does.
all of those beautiful things that are here for us.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on that note, what are you calling in? What are you excited about? What's next?
It's interesting. I've always been somebody who's had my finger on the pulse and known what's next, and I've always sort of
Hmm.
like had my hands in it.
Hmm.
And this is the first time in my life where I'm really sort of, I've pulled myself back more. I'm much more easeful. I am
Hmm.
really working with trust and patience that
Hmm.
what is meant for me is coming to me. Um,
Yeah.
that is an exercise in itself that is really really challenging. I've always sort of known. I've always been very busy, um,
Hmm.
and I'm really trusting. I'm really trusting
Hmm.
and really exercising patience right now.
It's an art
Uh-huh. I really
when you
believe that
master it.
it's what I'm here. Like I feel like those are the two big things that I am really, their soul. That's soul work.
I was going to say, when you master it, let me know. And then I kind of giggled because I know that and I've been told and shown and reminded many times that my lesson in this life is to go slow, is
Wow.
to like slow down.
Yeah.
Ah! And there's this part of me that's like, I can't, can't.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This year
Mm,
actually has been the first year that I didn't start off the year with like big, huge goals and
hmm.
aspirations. I have
Hmm.
probably leaned into rest more than I have ever in my life, and it is
Hmm.
uncomfortable. It is
Hmm.
very uncomfortable and very necessary. I don't
Hmm.
even think I realized how burnt out I was from my real
Hmm.
estate career, and that
Yeah.
always being in that on energy of being
Yeah.
available like
Yeah.
24/7. I think I had no idea the impact that it had had on me, and
Yeah.
I'm really in this space of like this gentleness, this tenderness, and this rest, as well as, so
Hmm.
it's interesting because like there's been enough work to
Mm-hmm.
make sure things are getting paid and like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so that fascinates me. That
Mm-hmm.
fascinates me that there's always seems to be just
Mm-hmm.
just what is required.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to trust that I will be taken care of, that
Yeah.
I can trust and that I can be patient with myself as I continue this healing journey, that it doesn't end, that it is an evolution, that I always will need
Mm-hmm.
to make time to take care of myself so that I can take care of people and that I can meet
Yeah.
them where they are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm here for it. Like I get
Mm-hmm.
curious. I'm really noticing certain things. I'm really paying attention to like my activations because they're a window into where my next work is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Can you share where's the best place to find you? Yeah, all the things that we would need to know if we want to stay in your world.
I find that everybody sort of is on social media as much as I don't love that to have my
Mm-hmm.
business built on social media.
Mm-hmm.
It is necessary. It's how
Mm-hmm.
people are finding us. So Instagram is
Mm-hmm.
where most people find me, and my handle is Carmen Smith Wellbeing for my Instagram. I am on Facebook as well, and then I have my website Carmen Smith Coaching, and
Okay.
that sort of gives the people an idea who I am, and if they're
Mm-hmm.
interested in reaching out, I do offer, of course, that initial call to just sort of get a
Mm-hmm.
sense if I'm the right person, because I do believe we have to find the right people to be
Mm-hmm.
on our path with us.
Yeah.
So it gives people an idea of who I am and if I am the right person to work with them.
Okay, wonderful. I'll link that all in the notes. Any final bits on your heart that you feel to share?
I just want to say how grateful I am for this
Yes.
time with you. I
Mm,
think it's so important. I love what you're doing. I love that you're providing a platform for women to share their experiences and their stories, because I think it is what is going to heal us. It is
yeah.
telling the truth and saying that this is what I've walked and I've survived it. I'm here and I'm better for
Mm-hmm.
it. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what helped me was hearing not just, an exact story or a similar story, but just those stories of people that overcome adversity are what kept
Mm-hmm.
me going. And I feel like it
Mm-hmm.
is my responsibility to share what I have gone through so that whatever person needs it, that they get that message, that
Yeah.
they will be okay. So the fact that you've created this beautiful platform for people to come and feel so safe with you, to
Mm-hmm.
be open and honest about what they've been through, I think it's beautiful. So
Thank
thank you.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. It's this podcast is unfolding in such beautiful ways where, as things do when they're aligned, I just didn't expect it to. But the conversations that I'm having and the wisdom that this is a very selfish thing of me to say, but the conversations I'm having and the wisdom I'm getting to be around is really quite life changing. And I sometimes forget that other people are actually listening as well. I'm like, this is great. So thank you for coming on and sharing your story and a little bit about who you are. And yeah, I trust that you'll have some visitors after listening. Mhm.
Well, I welcome them.
I know you do. All right. Enjoy your evening. Sending you so much love.
Thanks, Kyla.